What will be the future of global economy? How long it will take to revive? Stay with me to the end to go in depth. The world economy already faces an economic downturn worse than the Great Depression. But this could be followed by another possibly much worse downturn, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit (EIU). An estimated $9 trillion £7 trillion of output will be lost this year and next, the institution IMF said, equal to the combined economies of Germany and Japan. Overall, its economists expect global GDP to fall by 3% in 2020, the biggest drop in almost a century. The figures underline growing fears that measures to combat COVID-19 risk causing catastrophic damage to the world economy, which will tip millions into poverty and take many years to overcome. The UK economy will shrink by 6.5% this year. The IMF predicts its biggest fall since 1921 when demobilizing after the First World War. Major Eurozone economies are forecast to suffer even bigger slumps, from a crash of 7% in Germany to 9.1% in Italy. The falls are slightly smaller in other rich economies, however, with Japan, the US and Canada on track for recessions of 5.2%, 5.9% and 6.2% of GDP respectively. Sovereign debts that they are racking up may push the global economy into a second recession, the EIU warns. Earlier this week, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) said the world economy would shrink at its fastest pace in decades, raising fears it will be the worst recession since the 1930s Great Depression. The EIU now says there is a risk of a subsequent recession, driven by a debt crisis from governments with weak balance sheets. World faces worst decline since 1930s depression. Clothing makers give stark virus warning. Asian economies won't grow this year, warns IMF. Many of the European countries that are among the worst affected by the pandemic, such as Italy and Spain, already had weak fiscal positions before the outbreak, said Agatha de Marais, the EIU's global forecasting director. Countries around the world have responded to the crises engendered by the global pandemic, COVID-19, with appropriate economic rescue packages both on the monetary and fiscal side. World governments are giving trillions of dollars in stimulus packages to help prop up their economies. The U.S. government, for example, recently approved a massive $2 trillion United States dollars stimulus package to address the impacts on the economy. If companies are not producing and the borders are closed, this means imports are down and exports are down, therefore, revenues are down. It is anticipate that trade will be down by over 50 to 70% over the next 9 months and companies' revenues will be down perhaps by an equal or greater level than 70%. The dire need for a legitimate government in place becomes more paramount to handle these matters. The recovery in the global economy will only be gradual, all the more so as countries will lift lockdowns at different points in time. Consumer demand is unlikely to bounce back to pre-crisis levels immediately when social distancing is lifted and businesses are allowed to reopen. At the same time, the EIU says global supply chains may still be disrupted as countries lift restrictions at different times, creating bottlenecks. Assuming that the worst of the virus and the lockdown takes place in the second quarter of the year, the IMF predicts a modest bounce back into 2021. But GDP will not return to its level at the end of 2019 until 2022 at the soonest, and lost output suffered during the shutdowns will be gone forever.